we're live today with amazing Jen Ruiz, who is Jen on the jet plane. She's a famous travel author and travel influencer, travel expert. How would you describe yourself, Jen, to anybody who's not heard of you?
All of the above would apply, Tim. I think you're right on the money there.
And you have managed to pick a selection of books that has the greatest number of authors called Jen in it, partly because you're called Jen, but you also picked another author called Jen. So if anybody has Jen phobia when it comes to books, today's probably a show to avoid. But there's also a lot of interesting travel and other books on this list. So do you want to get started?
Let's do it.
Right. Here we are. I've got a new book choice logo. And the first book is Chillpreneur by Denise Duffield-Thomas. So why did you pick this book, Jen?
Well, I love Denise Duffield-Thomas. She is based out of Australia, and her goal is to empower women to make money online, but really using their own personal businesses, their own strengths. And I think that that is so relevant nowadays as we see a movement to the gig economy, to more freelance work that people are taking up. And so she empowers women to really think differently about money, to embrace more positive money mindsets so that they can make more money and expand their capacity. I think it was really important for me to grasp concepts that she shares about the ways that we limit ourselves and our earning potential. And that as an entrepreneur, her series, Chillpreneur, is one of many books that she's written, but her series of books have been really helpful for me on my entrepreneurial journey.
Okay. And so you say she's written a lot of books, and if I'd been a bit more organised in talking to you about it, we'd probably put her other books on. But what is this book about particularly to do with that entrepreneurial journey? And is it a good one for somebody to, if they pick this book off the shelf, would it be a good one for them to get introduced to that kind of entrepreneurial mindset?
Absolutely. And Tim, I don't want you to blame yourself. Please, you were so patient with me because I have been traveling and my schedule has been so hectic, right? So I appreciate you putting together what you could here. And I think Chillpreneur is the perfect book to start with because it encourages you to embrace this lifestyle of digital entrepreneurship, whether that is through content creation, whether that is through self-publishing, whether that is through launching your own course or coaching or consulting business or podcast. I think that it's a really helpful resource that will teach you how to price your services, how to determine your value, how to sell your value to others and do so in a way that you are feeling confident versus skeezy, right? Which is the problem when people get into sales. They feel like, oh, I don't feel good about myself. And Denise Duffield-Thomas, I think her work really helps you embrace that and share your services without hesitation and in a way that feels positive for everybody involved versus feeling like it's something that you're dreading doing.
Okay. Shall we go to the next book, which is by, I think you would say is actually a more esteemed author, he says. No, and it's going to be you. So here we go. And it's Affordable Flight Guide, How to Find Cheap Airline Tickets and See the World on a Budget by Jen Ruiz. So why did you write this book?
This was my very first book, and I wrote it because I realized that I had inadvertently been marketing this book during a travel challenge that I had taken, where I had found a lot of great flight deals and shared them. And so people wanted to know, how did you fly to New Zealand for $38? How did you fly to Ecuador for $16? Where are you finding these flight deals? And I ended up being the smarter author and the smarter entrepreneur here, right? And making the book that people wanted to read before the book that I really wanted to write, which was, more the memoir, the travel story that I did eventually write. But my very first book, The Affordable Flight Guide, was on how to help other people fly around the world. It was based off of a year where I took, 20 trips in 12 months to places all over the world. And I was featured in the Washington Post for how I regularly book these flights for under $400 round trip. So in the book, I talk about tactics like travel hacking and use of points and miles I talk about budget airlines and how you can find deals like $99 flights to Europe, from the US or across the pond, either way. And I talk about flight alert programs, which are a new development, but there's now, more than a dozen of them that notify you of deals. So if you are signed up to receive these alerts, you could have a Tuesday where you realize there's a $200 flight to Aruba, and next thing you know, you're on your way.
Okay. So, is it mainly, they got the flight alerts. A lot of people know about that. And people know about the points, though some people would say probably, well, you've earned those points. So does it include hacks about how to get points by not having to fly loads of things or getting expensive? Does it talk about other things apart from those kind of hacks? Is it a more sort of global guide to buying the cheapest flights?
Absolutely. So yeah. I think even if you're somebody who doesn't have access to the same travel credit card benefits, there's still so many ways that you could be earning points and miles for purchases you're already making through airline shopping portals, Delta and Ticketmaster. If you link your accounts, people are buying Taylor Swift tickets for thousands of dollars, and they could be getting thousands of Delta miles just for making that same purchase. So there's definitely ways that you can navigate that system to make the most out of spending that you're already doing.
Okay. Right. So I know it's always hard to interview people about their first book because there's two kind of authors I've talked to, and there are some people who write their passion project book as their first book, but it sounds like you wrote the book that people were asking you to write as your first book. So maybe So shall we go on to another book, which is not yours? It's the first name, so maybe the same first name. So here we go. Right. And it's You Are a Badass. Badass. How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life by Jen Sincero. So why did you pick this book?
So just as we were talking there about, writing a book, putting your ideas out into the world, I think that's something that takes a lot of courage. And for somebody who is looking for just a better way to assert yourself in your personal and your professional goals, I think that the entire You Are a Badass series is really helpful. This first book initially talks a lot about mindset, about self-limitations. And again, I know that this sounds a little bit repetitive, and I used to think so too. I used to skip over, mindsets, the introductory chapter, before we get to the real meaty stuff that we actually paid for. And I realized that until you have mindset down, until you believe that you're capable of succeeding in whatever it is that you ventured out to do, until you believe that your message is worthwhile and it's going to help people, until you believe that you are, somebody that is worth being paid and compensated for the talents that you're providing in the world, you're going to keep being the one that's undercutting yourself. You're going to keep being the one that's not applying to opportunities because you don't think that you would be selected. And your mindset's going to be the one that's going to stop you from succeeding. And in this world of entrepreneurship, of digital marketing, of being online, where there's so many things that really question your mental stamina and your fortitude every single day as you're dealing with bullies and negative comments and a lot of critiques and things that make you second guess yourself. You have to be strong mentally to succeed. And it's not something that it's a one and done thing. It's not like you read the book and boom, something has clicked, you've earned your badge, you never need to revisit the skill. It really is an ongoing process. And so I like to re-listen to these books in the series and, learn something new each time, or even just solidify that lesson, that positive affirmation, that thought process, to steer away from negative self-thoughts and from self-criticism and from really keeping yourself from succeeding.
Okay, so was there a particular point when you realized that you were getting results from your mindset, like where you made that mindset shift in your own life?
Absolutely. I think one really big one was when I think I had limited myself because there were so many, when I used to practice law before I did what I do now. And law is something that comes with an immediate prestige. You feel like you have earned every step of the way. You have this degree to back you up. And so when I started earning more than I did as an attorney, I felt a sense of guilt. I felt like I hadn't earned it. I felt like the work wasn't as important. And even though I was working harder, right? You work harder for yourself than you do for anybody else. You never turn off your mind when you're an entrepreneur. I felt guilty about making that money. And so because of that, I was keeping myself at a lower earning potential. And I really had to be okay with getting to the point where I said, you know, it's okay for me to be compensated well, not just for this work that I'm providing, but for the years that I've put into honing this skill, into building my audience, into building a reputation for myself, into going to multiple conferences every year and really networking and integrating myself into this, you know, community. Like, it has not all been overnight. It has not been instant, and I deserve to be compensated accordingly. But it was definitely a hurdle that I had to get over because I had these chains of this traditional career and what a traditional notion is of worth and value.
Okay. It's and another question. I mean, I know sometimes these kind of books are represented as being very like female based, let's say, but is this a book that a man could equally get as much kind of benefit from as a woman, or is it more aimed at a female market?
I think it's absolutely something that men could benefit from, but I think that men have to be open to really having that sense of self-awareness, self-examination, accountability, because in order for things to change, you have to change. You can't expect for all of these external circumstances to change and your life suddenly shift because everything else, you know, externally starts being different. Like, the change really has to occur with you. And so I think man or woman, it doesn't matter who's reading the book. It has to be somebody who's open to making those internal shifts, which can be very difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to the next book by that. Returning to the great author again. So the next book is, let me not make sure I don't pick the wrong one. You Need a Vacation, How to Travel with a Full-Time Job by Jen Ruiz. So why did you write this book then?
So this book is for anybody who wants to have more time off. For many years as an attorney, I was not able to travel, and then I took this travel challenge. And so I talk about ways that you can maximize the existing PTO that you have, ways that you can negotiate for more PTO in lieu of a raise or in lieu of, you know, an annual bonus, which many times we didn't have. And sometimes I'd be given something like a $50 gift card to the Cheesecake Factory. So instead of that, you know, can I get an extra day off? And so different tactics. This is really an easy read. It's meant to be quick. It was meant to be very affordable. I wanted it to be accessible for everybody, just to add for anybody who uses that excuse of saying, you know, I don't have the time off. I was an attorney in a very busy job. And so hopefully with these tips, you can find a way to navigate and to squeeze out some more time for yourself so that, you know, your work isn't taking over your life completely. Okay.
So I've seen you tweet and on threads, whatever you post about this challenge. So what actually was the challenge? It was something like did you take 20 weekends off in a year while also having a full-time job, something like that? You say a little bit about what the challenge was. I mean, it's actually quite impressive that you had a full-time job and did it, from what I remember.
Yes. So as an attorney, it was unheard of to have time off. And I would work on Christmas Day and Thanksgiving Day. And then once I switched from a private firm to a nonprofit, suddenly I had the days that the courts were closed off. And so with those normal bank holidays, you know, President's Day, 4th of July, things like that, and 10 days PTO, 3 days sick leave that I use, I was able to take a travel challenge where I set out to take one trip every month. About halfway through, I started doubling up the trips. And so I took 20 trips to 41 cities across 11 countries with that limited time off, and still, you know, coming back each time to continue working.
Okay. And for the people who are so poor that they can't buy your book, can you give them one tip for how to, if they want to make more from their time off. I mean, in Europe, we have like 25 days, so it's a bit easier here in a way. But what's one tip you can give them without giving away all the secrets in the book? Obviously, I'm sure there's more, but one tip you could give people who maybe just want to start making more use of their time off.
I think I very consciously labeled it, a 12 trips challenge, not a 12 countries challenge, because I don't want people to think that they have to go abroad in order for it to count as travel. I think that is the hesitation, that you think, it has to be this big trip. It has to be X amount of time in order for it to be worth my while. A trip could be you deciding that suddenly you are going to attend that beach festival that always happens and that you just think is so close that you take for granted, or you are going to go and visit that museum and take yourself out to dinner, or you're going to go and take a day trip somewhere in your state. I live in Florida. We have so many beautiful places. I went and swam with manatees just a few months ago, and I considered that a trip because it was a day that I took for myself to do something new and to take myself out of my everyday routine. And I think that that's the magic of travel that I want you to embrace. And you can find it a lot more accessibly than an 8-hour flight overseas. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm obviously a US travel aficionado because I've been to 50 US states. And I think US is actually an amazing place to travel. There's so many places to be able to go. But obviously, it's like I'm in the UK, and there are so many places in the UK I've not been to that are lovely. I've not yet actually got to Stonehenge. I've driven past it. I've never got to Stonehenge.
Oh my goodness!
And I live about 3 hours away, so we never appreciate where we're from. But there are local opportunities everywhere. Anyway, should we go on to the next book? It's the other Jen again. So, and make sure I pick the right one. You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. So I think this has been recommended before. So why did you pick this book?
This book is so important. It should be recommended. I know it's changed so many people's lives. So the first book that we talked about by Jen Sincero was more about mindset, positive affirmations, getting yourself into the wellness groove. She talks about a lot of different woo-woo things that she's tried and what actually works. And, it helped me switch my mindset around meditation and the value of that and the value of having quiet in your mind, the value of doing vision boards. So that's kind of the first book to get you situated. And then You Are a Badass at Making Money is so many people's, Bible almost in terms of digital entrepreneurship, because it is so good at breaking down how you can really elevate yourself and how you can take your ideas and monetize them and turn them into a business. So I have future books that we'll be talking about that, touch on this, but I really do believe, in part because of this book, that anybody with any kind of skill set can monetize that skill set online now. And I just look at it like, before, back in the day, you used to have traveling salesmen, and you would have, let's say, somebody trying to sell a vacuum, and they would go door to door, and they would, spend all day canvassing neighborhoods and hope to maybe reach 100 people and sell 2 vacuums. Now, with the click of a button, you can reach, 100,000 people, and you can sell thousands of vacuums without ever leaving your house. So there's really limitless potential in terms of what you can do. And so this book really gives you practical tools to be able to launch that and to turn your passion into profit.
Okay, sounds good. I've got this idea of you going around selling vacuums now when you're traveling. It's like you hand them a little sip. Do you want to buy a vacuum? So anyway, let's go on to your next book. So, and the next book is the Solo Female Travel Book, Tips and Inspiration for Women Who Want to See the World on Their Own Terms by Jen Ruiz. So why did you pick this book?
So I wrote this book because I think so many women think to themselves that they have to wait for somebody to join them before they travel. I think it's a default thought that we have, friends, family, somebody has to come with us in order for us to go. And it's nerve-wracking to go on your own. It's really an act of courage to decide that you're going to go and, put yourself somewhere completely foreign, not knowing anybody there. And so I wrote this book hoping to encourage women who are, wanting to take that leap, because solo female travel is not a hot trend anymore. It really is just the way things are. It's so common. So many women do it. It's not news. Women love to solo travel, and more so than men, women will travel solo again. It becomes addictive once you've already gone. It's like getting a tattoo, you can't get just one. You end up with, a half dozen of them before you know it. And so I love solo travel. I swear by it. Even when you're in a relationship, you have a family, I believe that solo travel can be rejuvenative. I believe that it can be educational. I believe that it can be empowering. And I really hope that every woman takes at least one solo trip.
So I'm going to ask you some questions about solo travel now. How long have you been solo traveling for? And when did you suddenly realize this is what you want to do? Because, how long have you been professionally solo traveling? I guess is the other question. So when did you get the solo travel bug, and when did it become like your lifestyle, so to speak?
I think it's so funny that you mentioned that you haven't been to Stonehenge, because when I graduated high school, my mom took me on a trip to Europe, and I convinced her to ditch the Trafalgar tour that we were on, because I knew that I could get us to Stonehenge with my Europe for Dummies book that I had. And just following the instructions, just reading the book. It was all here, the train times, where you have to go, where you get off. It was just, I felt confident I could do this. And then when I did, and we had this marvelous day in Stonehenge, I learned very early on that I was able to plan these itineraries, to take myself around, to figure things out on the ground on my own without somebody there to guide me, because I live alone. I'm already, doing and navigating that in my city, wherever I'm living, already on an everyday basis. So this is just doing so in another city. But a lot of the things remain the same. And so I think I learned early on that I was capable of doing so. I spent a summer in Australia when I was in law school, working for the Australian Law Reform Commission. And I was, all the way across the world from everybody. And I met a koala and a kangaroo, and I saw a show at the Sydney Opera House, and I had a lovely time there. And then now I've been doing this, I've traveled to 50 countries on my own, mostly as a professional travel writer.
Okay. So, again, I'm going to make you give away your secrets to people who are too stingy to buy your book. What's one tip that you would give to, a solo traveler, and especially a female solo traveler? What's one thing that's been really helpful one thing you've learned from your experience in traveling?
I think knowledge is power. And so I think it's really important to research before you go somewhere. I know that's not as sexy or attractive as spontaneous travel, but especially when you're going solo, connect with other local females on the ground, see what your attire should be like. What are some customs? What are neighborhoods you should avoid? What are common scams, so that you know what's happening. Is read the reviews and search the reviews for things like safety, for things like nighttime, all of that, so that you have an idea of what you're getting into. And if you do feel like this is a place where you're nervous about visiting on your own, you always have that possibility of going in a more secure setting through a closed container, like a cruise. I just got back from a river cruise with Viking River Cruises, and they, picked me up from the airport, handled all the excursions. I left and went and did some things on my own, but I didn't have to. And I could have been escorted by them from start to finish, and had that be, an experience where I felt very safe because I knew that this professional company was handling that. Similarly, I have friends that run a tour group for solo female travelers specifically. So you go solo, and then you're paired up with other solo female travelers on this trip. They hike Mount Kilimanjaro with an all-female porter team. So you have these spaces where you can feel safer in embarking in places where you might not be as confident on your own.
Yeah, obviously I'm not a female solo traveler, but I do solo travel a lot, and it's like what you were saying about research. Like last year, I went to Puerto Vallarta in Mexico, and I'd never been to Mexico before.
Oh.
And I remember watching. I ended up watching YouTube videos about it, and one of them they said like they have really cheap Uber in Puerto Vallarta. Like you can use the Uber app, but you can't be picked up in the airport. But they say just walk across this bridge. And it's like, so you avoid all of because I don't know about you, but I'm always very suspicious of taxi drivers at airports anywhere in the world, unless they've got a very regulated scheme. Some places have, but a lot of places, they rip you off. I mean, I've felt being ripped off. So if I can get Uber, Grab, or whatever, some other thing, I'll get it. And literally, Puerto Vallarta is you walk over this bridge and wait there and you can get an Uber. And it's at half price. So that research is so important, isn't it?
I absolutely agree.
Yeah. Anyway, should we go on to the next book, which is, you can tell that I've got this new book choice graphic this week. So, You Are Badass Every Day, How to Keep Your Motivation Strong, Your Vibe High, and Your Quest for Transformation Unstoppable by Jen Sincero. So why did you pick this book?
So I think that this is just a good refresher book. I think the first two of the Badass series are really the strongest. And this is her trying to reiterate and integrate those methods that she's already kind of laid out for you. So I think if you're just looking for, again, something to keep that practice, because this isn't one and done work. It's not that you're done reading the book and suddenly you are this fully self-actualized, completely self-aware and manifesting person. It really does require constant work. And so I try to fill up my audiobook library so that in the mornings I start off with positive input into my brain, as opposed to watching the news, which can be very, trauma heavy. It's really capitalizing on these sensationalist stories. And so I opt for something positive to put me in a productive mindset. And I try to make my library as full of as possible of this, really great content. And I think this is just one more to add to your arsenal.
Yeah. So would you say this is like they are in the right order, these books to read in the way that they've been getting? Because I did them by release date, basically, on the thing. Would you say they're in the correct order if somebody was going to read the whole trilogy?
I think so. I think, You Are a Badass at Making Money is definitely the most popular one, but I do think the first one is foundational. And I think as they go on, she's trying to reiterate the message and also to make a whole series out of it because it's so popular, right? So why not? Same way with The Secret. The Secret is another book that does this. I think, the original The Secret does great. And then they have The Secret for almost everything afterwards. Yeah. But I don't mind them because it's always good reiteration of these concepts that I am trying to learn and integrate and really practice.
Okay. Are you more an audio book person than a Kindle or paperback person then?
I can be, yes, especially because I do like to start my morning off smooth. I think before when I was commuting, maybe I would listen to like some shows or, things like that. And so this feels like an easy way to like ease into talking in the morning. Yeah. But again, without being aggressive, sad, worrying, like I know that I can still kind of block out the world for an hour or so in the morning before I have to deal with the realities of like what's happening today, So that's why I like them.
Yeah, I'm more of an audio book listener now. It's just convenient. That's the main thing. Right, let's go on to the next book, which pick the one. From Blog to Business, How to Make Money Blogging and Work From Anywhere by Jen Ruiz. It's you again. So why did you write this book and who's it for? Who is this book going to help?
So I think blogs really used to be looked down upon as this non-serious digital diary sort of thing. And now blogs are a website, major media things. They're all blogs. It's an address that you have online where you're providing specialized information about a topic. And people have turned their travel blogs into travel news, travel media outlets that are monetized through third-party publisher networks that host ads on the website and allow you to make passive income of money while you sleep, where you're paid for these articles that you've already written, similarly to how an artist is paid for a song that he's already created or a book that they've already done. You get this passive income stream. And it's really a way for anybody to be able to write about what they enjoy online. So if you're somebody who enjoys, binge watching things on Netflix, you could have a site where you're publishing recaps of all these new seasons that are released, and you're making sure that that content is SEO friendly, and that you're you're sharing it on Facebook groups for Netflix aficionados so that people can see your hot takes and comment on it. And then the more traffic that you get to this site, the more that you can monetize that site. You can do, sponsorships with people who want to, have popcorn that they're selling, or anything else that you can do, any other kind of related products. And that's just one example. So really anything that you enjoy, you can make a home of it online and actually monetize. And hopefully this book teaches you how to do that.
Okay. So for somebody who's new to this kind of thing, would you suggest they're better off writing their own blog, or are they better to write articles for bigger blogs? I think you put a link up online recently about writing for, I think it's Fodor's or one of the travel sites. Is that a better approach than just writing on your own website? And how did you learn about the SEO techniques, which is search engine optimization? It's like making your articles appear when people search for stuff. How did you learn about all of that? And is it in the book? Is that the answer for people who want to find it out? Read the book.
Yes, it's in the book. I have had people tell me that I break it down and summarize it in a very easy to understand way. I learned about it by going to in-person workshops at travel conferences. And so doing, full day hands-on exercises where I'm learning about the concepts. And I have a gift for summarizing things, because I did that as a lawyer, right? Let me take really complicated concepts and summarize that for a jury, for anybody really. And so I do that now with SEO. And so, yes, that's in the book. And remind me what the first part of the question was.
Is it better to write on your own blog, or to write and be paid for other people's blogs? Or is that something, should you do both?
That's such a great question. And I think the answer is that when you're starting, it really helps to have these guest posts on these other bigger, well-known sites for various reasons, for the clout, for the visibility, but also for the backlink to your site, because that helps your site have more authority if other people have linked back to it. As you grow and as you start to monetize your own website, you have to be careful about it, because you don't want to give away content that would have performed well on your site. So for my example, in the travel realm, I would keep something like a listicle of like 10 best museums in St. Pete for my website, and maybe pitch an article of like what it was like for me to spend a day at the Dali Museum, as a more narrative article that I would have published on a bigger media outlet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Right. Let me find the right thing here. Right, here we go. So here's the next book, which is The Undomestic Goddess, Perfect Escapism, from the #1 bestseller by... I think I mistyped this. But anyway, the Undomestic Goddess, Perfect Escapism, from Sophie Kinsella. I don't think she was escaping from being #1 there. I think I mistyped that. Anyway, why this book?
So this author is very famous for having written the Shopaholic series, but I liked this book because it was about an attorney that had made a horrible mistake at her job. And so she decided to leave it all behind and go kind of run away in the countryside and work in this house. And she falls for this gardener. So it was this really kind of fun escape about somebody in a similar profession to me. And on top of that, I enjoyed, because I enjoyed how many books Sophie Kinsella has been able to write in addition to the Shopaholic series that have been successful. So it wasn't just that series. Pretty much all of these other books that she's written have been huge hits. And on top of that, as an author, she's so prolific. She's, going through some health struggles right now and still cranking out books. Mm-hmm. So I admire her as a writer. I love her storytelling, I think, and it's feel-good books. I think so many things right now are heavy. There's so many, horrible exposés and true crimes and things like that. So I think I enjoy just the levity and the comfort in knowing that these books are going to turn out okay.
Yeah. So it's the link with the lawyer element, but I mean, I think she has a reputation. When you say this chick lit, as the terrible thing they say, it's kind of like lighter, kind of, but more entertaining fiction. Would that be a good description of the book?
Absolutely. Her books have been made into rom-coms. And so that's basically it. It's a book version of a rom-com, which who doesn't want to watch them? I actually read that it can be, there was somebody who decided to only watch funny movies for 6 months as a way of, treating and healing themselves, and that it did have a really positive impact on their health. Because imagine how much stress and negative hormones your body releases when you're watching something that's triggering you, that has you on edge, versus something that has you laughing, feeling good every single day, like just releasing so many joys and endorphins. And so I do think that there is value for happy, chick lit, rom-com books. I think that in this world, maybe those are the most valuable things of all, right? So I definitely wouldn't disregard it or diminish it in any way, because it brings us a lot of joy, which we need.
Okay, right. We've only got this one author left, but it's you. So 2 books left. So 25 Ways to Work from Home, Smart Business Models to Make Money Online by Jen Ruiz. So why did you write this book?
So this book is really just to give you some brainstorming ideas, inspiration, and true life examples of people that have made it work. So if you want to make podcasting your business, let's talk about it. What would that business model look like? What are some examples of people who've made that happen? What are some helpful websites for you to start? So it really is meant to be that manual, so you can think, what is my next move if I want to monetize online? Yeah.
So this sounds like it's a more general version of the blogging book, in terms of this is not just blog. Is there an element of blogging in there? Is this like discussing the 25 ways of all different areas, and presumably they're all areas that you've made money from? Is that correct?
Myself or people that I know personally. And yes, blogging is one of the 25 ways to work from home. Yeah.
And if you had to pick one as the only way you can make money. Actually, let me ask you, I'm going to be annoying here, but one, if you had to make money, and one other one, if it was just some person in general. So what would be your most favorite of these 25 ways? And what would you say is the best one for just somebody who wants to earn money online or doing something?
I would probably stick with self-publishing, because I enjoy self-publishing. I like writing, and I think I can cover a lot of different topics under that umbrella, that it evolves with me even as I grow. Like, let's say I start a family, and then I start a book about, a family series. So I really think it has that flexibility to continue with me. And I hope that author is always a career that I have, no matter in what format that is. And then for others, I think, teaching English online was the way that I transitioned. It was something that I started doing that year that I took the 12 trips in 12 months challenge. That was how I was able to afford the trips. So every day before going into work, I would teach English online, and I would make like $20 an hour doing that. And that allowed me to set my schedule as much as I wanted to, work from anywhere, and have an income stream digitally that didn't conflict, didn't violate any non-competes. Nobody even knew about it. The contract was with a company based in China. And, you do it before work. So it really, I think, is an ideal gateway job for anybody wanting to transition.
Yeah, I mean, I've known people who've done that. They're like, I knew somebody who's like house sitting, and they're like going around the world, and they're just teaching English online. I think it's like italki and sites like that, isn't there? There's quite a few sites for doing that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Should we go on to your final book, which I trailed because it is your most recent book, which is 12 Trips in 12 Months, Make Your Own Solo Travel Magic by Jen Ruiz. So why did you write this book? I think I might have spoiled it by mentioning the challenge earlier, but why did you write this book? And why is it so wonderful? And why is it you keep showing pictures of it in airport stores. So Why is it in airport stores? Why is it so popular?
Well, this is the book that I had wanted to write after completing that year-long challenge. And there's so many themes in this book that I hope speak to and resonate with others. Approaching that milestone birthday and wondering, am I where I want to be? Am I, hitting all these markers of adulthood that I thought I would by now? Is that okay? Am I living on my timeline or somebody else's? And, have I achieved what I wanted to by now? Do I need to course correct? 30 is really the first birthday where you're grappling with those questions, because before then, you're just not thinking about it. It doesn't really hit you in your 20s. And so I think that that's something that universally a lot of people can relate to. Also really talking about what it is to decide that you want to take on this transformative travel challenge. So in the ways that travel can make you feel present, can make you feel alive again, can make you feel reinvigorated, can give you clarity at a time of transition or at a time when you're looking to make a big decision in your life. Travel can really help you pave the way to the next chapter. And I think that that's something that I hope to encourage people, that power of travel to really guide you on life's phases. And I think we've seen that, right, in these big other memoirs that have done so well. In Eat, Pray, Love, it was when she was getting divorced. Then in the Pacific Crest Trail and Wild, it was when she was mourning her mom's death. And so I think travel for so many people is a balm, a salve, medicinal, a way that you can, mark that end of a chapter and the start of a new one. And so for me, at that period of the in-between and that new era, that was something that was really powerful and a way to send out my 20s in a memorable way. And so I encourage others to, who are reading the book, to really infuse more adventure into their life and to really find ways to let travel change your life.
So this is 12 trips in 12 months while you're working full-time as an attorney.
Yes.
So, and in the US, where you get hardly any vacation days.
Correct.
So, if you weren't working full-time, I suspect you probably do more than 12 trips in 12 months now, because it's kind of your job.
Yes.
But yeah. So how did when you say it was a challenge, did somebody say this to you as a challenge, or was this a challenge that you decided yourself to create? How did the challenge start in the first place?
It was an internal challenge that I decided to do. It started because I was celebrating my birthday in Athens, and I had my own, questions over whether or not, about being single and without children approaching 30. And so I wanted something that was going to distract myself from those thoughts, and really have my last year of my 20s be something productive, something happy, something positive, something that I was going to look back on fondly. So I did use 3 days of sick leave. I called out sick to go up a hot air balloon at the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. I called out sick to go to a VIP taping of The Chew at Disney World. And I think I had one more that I called out sick for. I don't recall immediately off the top of my head. But I had, these different days that I use to really embrace that. And I think that that's also part of the message, right? Time is going to go by either way. And I think we feel so much guilt about taking time off. We feel guilt about calling out sick. We feel guilty about these things when jobs will replace you the minute that you're gone. And time goes by and you miss your opportunity to make these memories, to go on these trips, to really have these more intense activities while you have mobility to do so and the youth to do so and the energy to do so. And so my goal with this book is hopefully to inspire people to stop waiting and to start living. And the subtitle, the Make Your Own Solo Travel Magic, really talks about how when you do put yourself out there, you end up finding, especially when you're alone, because it's easy to gift something to one person, invite one person somewhere, squeeze one person in. So I had so many instances where it felt like the world was rewarding me just for the bravery of putting myself out there.
Yeah. And did this challenge... Because, are you doing any work as a lawyer right now, or are you full-time as a travel kind of writer, traveler, I suppose?
Yes, at the end of the year, I transitioned to doing this full-time. I could still be practicing as a lawyer. I still have my licenses and I keep them inactive. But I personally didn't enjoy it. I felt like it, in the I practiced law for 5 years, and in those 5 years, I was the attorney of record on more than 700 cases. And so I worked really hard as an attorney, and it was very adversarial every day. And so to every single day get worked up and angry and fight people, I knew that that was what I was signing up for, but it just takes a toll on you, because I wasn't the kind of person that could very easily shut down, especially, when I saw injustice. That was a trigger for me. And that's what made me a good attorney, because I cared enough to fight, but it also took so much out of me, and it just really wasn't sustainable. And so I feel like in what I do now as a digital storyteller, I use a lot of those same skills, writing, public speaking, only instead of trying to tell the jury why, my client's story should win this case, I'm telling you why you should spend your tourism dollars on this destination or this small business. But I'm still using a lot of those same skill sets, but in a way that feels a lot easier.
Yeah. So did that full-time travel life arise from this challenge then? Would you say that doing the 12 trips, at the end of it, you were like, traveling is so much better than being a lawyer? Was that kind of your thought process?
It is, yes. But I want to note that I don't travel full time. I have a home base. I actually know about myself that I can't be somewhere usually more than 3 weeks, or I get a little antsy. I like to have a sense of routine. And I think just like full-time digital nomad life can be very stressful. I need to have some sort of, base. So I do travel quite frequently for my job, usually at least 2 trips a month kind of thing. I spent the last 2 weeks in Europe visiting 7 countries. But normally, I do like to have a base. Because I think I knew that I wanted to pursue a life of my own making, where I didn't have to check with anybody when I wanted to take time off, where I didn't have anybody, redlining or having to approve all of my efforts. As Jen on a jet plane, I am the final say on anything that I post, and I can write whatever I want, and I can submit whatever I want. And I enjoyed that freedom, that creative freedom and creative license, and not feeling like, as an attorney, there's so many things that you can't do or say, and, professionalism and things like that. And so I appreciate just having my own business where I can have my own opinions and I can just live freely. I mean, now with the publisher, I do have people redlining my work still. So there's still that element of it, but I think they make it better. And I did appreciate having, so many editors in this process. Okay.
So that's all the books done, but I've got 2 questions I usually ask people at the end. One which has evolved. I used to ask people, like, if you had to pick one of these books, which book would you pick? But now I've got a more complicated, more expansive question. What would be, if you had to, describe like a flow chart, if you met somebody and you had to give them one of these books from your list, what kind of questions would you ask them? What sort of flow chart in your mind would be the thing to work out which book amongst this list of books to give that person?
I would first want to know what their goal is. So is your goal that you want to travel more? Is your goal that you want to make money online and maybe transition to a different career? Or is your goal that you just want to be entertained with like fun travel stories? Yeah. And then from there, I would funnel it down. So if you want like practical tips, maybe the Solo Female Travel Book, the Affordable Flight Guide, to help you actually book more vacations. If you want stories, 12 trips in 12 months, the Undomestic Goddess, I think there's some good ways to go. And if you're somebody who wants to launch your own business, definitely you are a badass at making money. And 25 ways to work from home are a great place to start. Okay.
And the other question I ask, I don't ask this to people who aren't authors, but it's surprising, even people who aren't authors who I ask have usually got a next book that they're thinking about writing. So what would be the next book, assuming you're going to write anymore, you've not given up writing, but what will be the next book you write? And have you got a book that's kind of like your really passion book that you're going to write at some point in the future that's in your mind, but you're not quite there yet?
I am currently writing the sequel to 12 Trips in 12 Months. I inadvertently had another 12 trips in 12 months challenge planned last year that happened at another time of transition around my 35th birthday. So it just timed out, perfectly to go with this existing story, but really digging in deeper into those themes of self-worth and transformation through these beautiful experiences, like going to a kintsugi class in Japan, learning about how to relate to these broken pieces being mended by gold decor, and how to know that you yourself are more beautiful because of your broken pieces and of your history, that it's okay to not be in your original manufactured condition your whole life, and that's, you're better for it. Going to see the Moai in Easter Island and having that transformative experience in an island in the middle of really nowhere, 2,000 miles away from anything else. Really letting my inner child play by riding the real life Hogwarts Express in Scotland. These really beautiful travel experiences that helped me at a time in my life that things were not maybe going so well, and so hopefully it helps for other people to inspire them, and ending with, being charged by gorillas in Rwanda on an all-out birthday trip with a major health scare that thankfully turned out okay, but definitely a roller coaster of a ride. So hopefully in a way that it inspires people to keep going, to still find, hope in that next chapter of their life, and to, as always, use travel as a way to facilitate that growth.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you this question, even though I'm sure you've been asked this a few times, but where is the best place you've been, and where is the first place you would choose to visit if money was no object? So it's a double-barrel question. I apologize for having it. So yeah, where is the best place you've been, and where is the best place you want to go to?
Well, I think so far I've really enjoyed the south of France in full bloom, having the lavender fields, the sunflower fields. I love art. So being able to find the real life places that Van Gogh painted and comparing them to the paintings and seeing how the lights on the river are still the same as the way that he painted them, decades earlier. To me, that was very exciting and just lovely, just so pleasant. So I would go back there in a heartbeat. And I think if I had unlimited money, I would probably head to somewhere like Fiji, because I think, as opposed to the Maldives, which the Maldives are amazing, and but I think maybe much more to be about relaxation and enjoying the really luxurious premises and like the beautiful properties that there are there. I do think Fiji has that element of like wanting to learn about the local culture and a sense of joy and celebration in how the locals share with others that come and visit. I think, that it's not one happy island, but they have happy in their slogan, and that's part of it. And I have a friend that went on a trip there, and I saw, just beautiful experiences that she had there, dances that she was doing, just really wonderful sunsets that she had, and barbecues with, huge groups of people. So it just seemed like, to me, a very welcoming and culturally rich destination that I would love to explore more of. And because it's, quite opposite in the world to where I am, it would probably be one of the more expensive destinations. So if money were no object, that's probably where I'd head.
Well, hopefully somebody from the Fiji Tourist Board is watching this, or in the future, and they'll be like, "Oh, we've got to get her over." So
I am available.
How can people find out more about you if they want to read more about you, find out about your books? Like, where can they go? You mentioned a website. Obviously, you have a blog. What is that blog? And if they want to get in touch with you in social media, how do they do that?
You can find me at jenonajetplane.com, like leaving on a jet plane, Jen on a jet plane. And also under that same handle, at Jen on a jet plane on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, X, LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm under Jen Ruiz. But yes, pretty much on all social media, YouTube, Jen on a jet plane, and Jen only has one N.
Okay. And I think Jen, for you, the generation you're in, Jen is the most popular name.
Yes.
Like, so many people called Jen who've been in their 30s. It's but you are the one on the jet plane, so you're ahead of everybody else.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for being the guest today, Jen. And thanks for everybody who's been watching on Amazon Live or LinkedIn Live. And thanks in the future to anybody who watches on YouTube or is listening on the podcast. So thanks so much for being the guest today.
Thanks for having me.